Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that sits at the very heart of a nation's stability, its very soul, the justice system. In South Africa, a country that has wrestled with its past and is constantly fighting for its future, the judiciary is supposed to be the ultimate guardian of fairness, the one place where the scales are truly balanced. But what happens when the very people entrusted with upholding the law are accused of breaking it? When the robes and gavels, symbols of impartiality, become cloaks for personal gain and prejudice? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? We're going to peel back the layers on a deeply unsettling question. Just how deep does corruption run in the South African judiciary? This isn't about baseless rumors or political mudslinging. We are talking about documented allegations, official inquiries, and public scandals that have shaken the foundations of public trust. These are some of the most notorious cases that have ever been brought into the light, cases that force us to confront a shocking and uncomfortable truth about the state of justice in the Rainbow Nation. So, get ready. We're about to embark on an investigative journey into the lives and controversies of 10 judges whose careers have been marked by serious allegations. We'll separate fact from fiction, examine the evidence, and explore the profound impact these scandals have had. This is more than just a list. It's a critical look at a system in crisis, a system that, for the sake of 60 million people, must be held to the highest possible standard. Let's begin. Our journey begins with a name that is virtually synonymous with judicial controversy in South Africa, Judge President John Hlofi. Now, this isn't just any judge. We're talking about the Judge President of the Western Cape High Court, one of the most powerful judicial positions in the country. You'd expect a person in this role to be beyond reproach, a legal titan whose integrity is as solid as Table Mountain. But with Judge Hlofi, the story is far, far more complicated. His career has been a long and winding road paved with one explosive allegation after another. The most infamous chapter in the Hlofi saga dates back to 2008. This is the big one. Two of the country's most senior judges, from the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, made a bombshell claim. They alleged that Judge Hlofi had approached them to try and improperly influence their judgment in a case involving none other than the then-president Jacob Zuma. Let that sink in. The head of a major court division allegedly trying to swing a case for the head of state. It's the kind of plot you'd expect from a political thriller, not the real-life workings of a constitutional democracy. This single accusation triggered a legal and political firestorm that has raged for over a decade. It led to a labyrinth of investigations, counter-investigations, and legal challenges. The Judicial Service Commission, or JSC, the very body responsible for disciplining judges, was tied in knots. For years it seemed like the process was going nowhere, a perfect example of justice delayed becoming justice denied. Hlofi, for his part, has always maintained his innocence, framing the accusations as part of a political conspiracy against him. But the cloud of suspicion never lifted. The saga finally culminated in a historic, and for many, a long overdue moment. After years of deliberation, a judicial conduct tribunal found Hlofi guilty of gross misconduct. It was a landmark finding, the first of its kind against such a senior judge. The JSC eventually recommended his impeachment, a process that would require a 2/3 majority vote in Parliament. This wasn't just about one man, it was a test of the entire system's ability to hold even its most powerful figures accountable. The Hlofi case became a symbol of a judiciary under siege, not just from external political pressures, but from within its own ranks. It raised profound questions about the appointment process, the snail's pace of judicial discipline, and the immense difficulty of removing a compromised judge from the bench. His story serves as a stark and sobering reminder that power, especially judicial power without unwavering integrity, can become a threat to the very fabric of the rule of law. Next up, we have a case that swapped the hallowed halls of the courtroom for the harsh tarmac of a suburban street, and in doing so, put the judiciary's image on trial in the court of public opinion. This is the story of Judge Nkola Motata. Before the incident that would define his legacy, he was a respected judge of the Pretoria High Court. But one night in 2007, everything changed, and his name became linked not with legal precedent, but with a drunken, expletive-laden tirade captured on tape for all to hear. The facts of the incident are as dramatic as they are damaging. Judge Motata crashed his luxury Jaguar through the wall of a private home in Johannesburg. When the homeowner confronted him, what followed was a shocking display. Audio recordings from the scene captured the judge, audibly intoxicated, slurring his words and making racist and offensive remarks. He infamously told the homeowner, "No boar is going to undermine me. This is our world." The man meant to be a symbol of sober judgment was anything but. The legal fallout was immediate and messy. Judge Motada was charged with drunk driving and the case dragged on for years, filled with appeals and technical legal arguments. He was eventually convicted, but the sentence was seen by many as shockingly lenient, a fine of just 20,000 rand. For many South Africans, it felt like a slap on the wrist, a classic case of one standard for the powerful and another for everyone else. The public outcry was immense. How could a judge who showed such contempt for the law and for his fellow citizens continue to sit in judgment of others? The Judicial Service Commission once again found itself in the spotlight. The process to determine Motada's fitness to hold office was painstakingly slow. It took more than a decade from the night of the crash for a final decision to be reached. A judicial conduct tribunal eventually found him guilty of gross misconduct, not just for the drunk driving itself but for the racist remarks he made at the scene, which were deemed fundamentally incompatible with the office of a judge. Ultimately, the recommendation was that he should be removed from office. However, due to the years that had passed, the practical effect was different, as he had already retired. Still, the Motada case left a deep and lasting scar on the public's perception of the judiciary. It showcased a stunning lack of personal accountability from a high-ranking official, and exposed, yet again, the frustratingly slow-moving gears of the judicial disciplinary system. It was a potent cocktail of arrogance, racism, and a justice system struggling to police its own. Our third case is a story steeped in irony. It's about a man who built his entire public reputation on being South Africa's top corruption buster, only to find himself resigning from the bench under a cloud of his own corruption allegations. Meet Judge Willem Heath, the man who once headed the formidable Heath Special Investigating Unit, or SIU. In the late 90s and early 2000s, this unit was the stuff of legend, tasked with clawing back billions of rand stolen from the state. Judge Heath was the face of this crusade. He was seen as a fearless warrior against graft, a white knight in a judicial robe. The Heath unit's investigations into government corruption, particularly the controversial arms deal, made him a household name, and in the eyes of many, a national hero. He was the man who was supposed to clean up the system, to hold the powerful to account. The very idea that he could be compromised seemed unthinkable to his supporters. But the tide began to turn. A major constitutional issue arose regarding his dual role. The Constitutional Court ruled that it was unconstitutional for a sitting judge to head an executive body like the SIU, as it violated the separation of powers. This was a significant blow, but the real trouble was brewing elsewhere. Allegations began to surface that Judge Heath was using his position and the information gathered by his unit for personal and political ends. The hunter was now being accused of playing dirty. The most damaging claims came from his former associates and were linked to his private business dealings. There were allegations of improper financial relationships and conflicts of interest that directly contradicted his public image as an impartial crusader. Whispers grew into formal complaints, and the pressure mounted. The man who wielded the sword of investigation now found it pointed directly at his own chest, and the scrutiny was intense. Faced with a formal inquiry by the Judicial Service Commission into these mounting allegations, Judge Heath made a pivotal decision. In 2001, he chose to resign from the bench. While he cited personal reasons and denied any wrongdoing, the timing was impossible to ignore. For his critics, it was a clear admission that he couldn't withstand the scrutiny. His resignation left a complex legacy, a man who did incredible work exposing corruption, yet whose own career ended amidst the very same kind of controversy he was meant to fight. It was a cautionary tale about how even the most celebrated heroes can fall from grace. With our fourth judge, we return to the hallowed chambers of the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the land, and the ultimate protector of the Constitution. This is where we encounter Justice Chris Jafta, a respected jurist whose name became entangled in one of the most significant judicial controversies in South Africa's democratic history, the very same saga that ensnared Judge John Hlofe. His involvement, though different, raises equally troubling questions about judicial integrity and independence. Justice Jafta was one of the two Constitutional Court judges who, back in 2008, reported that Judge Hlofi had approached them in an attempt to improperly influence their decision in cases related to Jacob Zuma. Justice Jafta, along with his colleague Justice Besnikabindi, stood at the epicenter of this storm. They were the whistleblowers, the ones who had the courage to bring the alleged misconduct to light. You would think this would make them heroes, and in many ways, it did. However, the ensuing process became incredibly complex and at times, contradictory. As the Judicial Service Commission's investigation stumbled along for years, the narrative began to shift and fracture. Justice Jafta, as a key witness, found himself under immense scrutiny. His testimony and his recollection of events were picked apart by Hlofi's legal team. The process became less of a straightforward investigation and more of a grueling adversarial battle that put the witnesses themselves on trial. This long, drawn-out process created a perception of division and turmoil within the judiciary itself. The public watched as senior judges gave conflicting accounts and were subjected to aggressive cross-examinations. For Justice Jafta, what started as an act of upholding judicial ethics turned into a years-long ordeal. It highlighted the immense personal and professional cost of blowing the whistle, even when you're a judge at the highest level. While Justice Jafta was never the one accused of misconduct in this affair, he was the one reporting it. His story is crucial. It illustrates the immense pressure that can be placed on judges and the institutional weaknesses that can make holding a fellow judge accountable a torturous process. The controversy surrounding his testimony, and the subsequent attacks on his credibility, served as a chilling message to others who might consider speaking out. It showed that even when you do the right thing, the system can make you pay a heavy price. Some controversies are about complex legal arguments or subtle abuses of power. This one is not. This story is about raw, undisguised prejudice from a person whose job demands absolute impartiality. We're talking about Judge Mabel Jansen of the Pretoria High Court, whose career imploded in 2016 after a series of shocking racist comments she made in a private conversation were made public. It was a scandal that ripped the bandage off the still festering wound of racism in post-apartheid South Africa. The comments were made in a Facebook exchange with a local activist. In these messages, Judge Jansen expressed views that were not just offensive, but deeply disturbing coming from a sitting judge. She claimed that rape was part of black culture, stating, "In their culture, a woman is there to pleasure them. Period." She went on to make other sweeping derogatory generalizations about black South Africans, painting a picture of a mind steeped in the very stereotypes the nation's constitution seeks to dismantle. When these private messages were leaked to the public, the backlash was swift and ferocious. The story exploded across social media and news outlets. The outrage was palpable. How could a judge who held such vile, racist beliefs possibly be expected to preside fairly over cases involving black people? The very idea was an affront to justice. It called into question every single judgment she had ever made and undermined the credibility of the entire bench she served on. Faced with a firestorm of public condemnation, Judge Jansen was forced to take special leave. She attempted to defend her comments, claiming they were taken out of context and were based on her experiences with specific trauma cases she had handled as an advocate. But for the vast majority of South Africans, there was no context that could possibly justify such language. The damage was done. Her words had revealed a mindset completely at odds with the values of equality and human dignity enshrined in the law. The Judicial Service Commission was inundated with complaints, and an investigation was launched. However, before the disciplinary process could reach its conclusion, Judge Jansen opted to resign. Her departure was inevitable, but the questions she left behind were profound. How many other people in positions of power hold similar views privately? Her case was a brutal reminder that simply changing the laws of a country doesn't automatically change the hearts and minds of all its citizens, even those appointed to uphold those very laws. Our next case takes us into the murky waters of one of South Africa's most enduring political scandals, the arms deal. This multi-billion-dollar military procurement program from the late 1990s has been plagued by allegations of widespread bribery and corruption for decades. And at the periphery of this scandal, we find the name of a highly respected judge, Mohamed Navsa of the Supreme Court of Appeal, whose past association with a key figure raised uncomfortable questions. Before his appointment to the bench, Judge Navsa had a distinguished career as a lawyer. During that time, he had a professional relationship with the late Shabir Shaikh, a businessman who would later be convicted of corruption in connection with the arms deal. This relationship, specifically legal work done for Shaikh, became a point of contention and scrutiny years later, casting a long shadow over the judge's otherwise stellar reputation. The core of the controversy revolved around payments and financial benefits that Navsa allegedly received from Sheikh's companies during the time the arms deal was being negotiated. These weren't allegations of bribery in a straightforward sense, but rather questions about potential conflicts of interest and whether these financial ties were fully disclosed and appropriate. When you're dealing with a scandal as vast as the arms deal, any connection to its central figures is bound to attract intense scrutiny. These concerns were raised publicly, most notably by anti-corruption campaigners and journalists who were digging into the intricate web of the arms deal. They questioned whether Judge Navsa's past relationship with Shaikh could create a perception of bias, especially if he were ever to preside over matters related to the scandal. In the world of judicial ethics, perception is often as important as reality. The appearance of a conflict can be just as damaging to public trust as an actual one. Judge Navsa has consistently and strenuously denied any wrongdoing. He has maintained that his professional dealings with Shaikh were entirely proper and occurred before he became a judge. No formal findings of misconduct were ever made against him by the Judicial Service Commission in relation to this matter. Nevertheless, the association has lingered, a footnote in the sprawling arms deal saga that serves as a reminder of how difficult it can be for public figures to shake off past associations, especially when they are linked to a scandal that has so deeply eroded public trust in the country's leadership. Sometimes the controversy isn't about a dramatic courtroom outburst or a high-profile political case. Sometimes it's about something that happens behind the scenes, something that raises quiet but deeply troubling questions about ethics and influence. This is the story of the late Judge Ronnie Bosiello, a judge of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and a questionable loan that threatened to tarnish his long and respected career on the bench. The controversy came to light during the corruption trial of a prominent South African businessman. It emerged in court that this businessman, who was facing serious charges, had provided a substantial loan of 600,000 rand to Judge Bosiello. Now, a loan between two private individuals isn't necessarily a problem, but when one of those individuals is a senior judge and the other is a wealthy businessman often involved in litigation, the ethical alarm bells start ringing very, very loudly. The timing and nature of this transaction were immediately suspect. Was it a genuine arm's-length loan with a proper repayment plan, or was it something else? A payment designed to curry favor or buy influence? The businessman in question had a history of litigation, and the possibility that he might one day appear in a case before the Supreme Court of Appeal, where Judge Bosiello sat, was very real. This created a glaring potential conflict of interest. The revelation sparked an immediate investigation by the judicial authorities. Judge Bosiello was placed on special leave while the matter was probed. He defended the transaction, characterizing it as a personal loan from a friend to help him with a personal financial situation. He insisted that it had no bearing on his judicial duties and that he had every intention of paying it back. But in the judiciary, the appearance of impropriety can be as corrosive as actual misconduct. The case highlighted a gray area in judicial ethics regarding the personal financial dealings of judges. Where is the line between a private transaction and a potential conflict of interest? How can the public be assured that a judge's decisions are not being influenced by financial obligations to powerful individuals? Tragically, Judge Bosiello passed away before the disciplinary process against him was concluded, leaving these questions unanswered. His case remains a cautionary tale about the critical importance of financial transparency and the dangers of judges forming close financial relationships with powerful figures outside the courtroom. Public speaking is, a crucial part of a judge's life, not just in the courtroom but also in academic and public forums. Their words carry, honestly, immense weight. But what happens when a judge uses that platform to express views that are seen as sexist, insensitive, and completely out of touch? This brings us to Judge Nigel Willis, formerly of the Supreme Court of Appeal, whose comments at a legal conference sparked a firestorm of controversy and led to accusations of misogyny. The incident happened during a conference where Judge Willis was a speaker. In his address, he made comments that were widely interpreted as blaming patriarchy on women and, suggesting that women's whinging and whining held them back in the legal profession. He also made remarks about the physical appearance of female lawyers that were, frankly, deemed inappropriate and objectifying. For many in the audience, especially women, the comments were not just offensive. They were a slap in the face from a man in a position of immense authority. The fallout was, honestly, immediate. Legal bodies, gender activists, and fellow lawyers condemned the remarks. The story quickly hit the news, with many people asking how a judge on one of the country's highest courts could harbor and publicly express such archaic and sexist views. The judiciary is supposed to be at the forefront of advancing constitutional values like gender equality. Judge Willis's comments suggested a mindset that was really diametrically opposed to those values. Faced with the backlash, Judge Willis issued an apology. He claimed his remarks were intended to be provocative and to stimulate debate, but he acknowledged that they were clumsy and had caused offense. However, for his critics, the apology was just not enough. They argued that the comments revealed a deeper, problematic attitude that was unbecoming of a judge. The incident raised serious questions about his suitability to preside over cases involving gender-based violence or discrimination. The Judicial Service Commission received complaints and the matter was referred for investigation. Like in some other cases we've seen, the process was slow, and Judge Willis eventually retired from the bench before a final disciplinary outcome was reached. But the scandal left its mark. It was a stark illustration of how, a few ill-conceived sentences can shatter a reputation and expose the lingering presence of outdated patriarchal attitudes within the very institutions tasked with eradicating them. Our ninth case brings us once again to the Constitutional Court, the apex of South Africa's legal system, and to Justice Leona Theron. Her story is, different from many of the others on this list. It's not about bribery or overt prejudice, but about a more subtle and complex issue of judicial temperament and conduct. It revolves around an allegation that she made a threatening remark to a prominent advocate, an incident that raised concerns about her impartiality and judicial demeanor. The controversy stems from an alleged interaction between Justice Theron and a senior counsel who was representing a client in a high-stakes case. The advocate claimed that during a court adjournment, Justice Theron approached him and made a comment to the effect of, "We will see how you will be dealt with." The advocate interpreted this as a threat, a sign of personal animosity from the judge that could compromise the fairness of the proceedings. This accusation was honestly a serious one. A fundamental principle of justice is that judges must not only be impartial, but must also be seen to be impartial. Any suggestion that a judge is personally invested in the outcome of a case, or holds a grudge against a lawyer appearing before them, strikes at the heart of that principle. The advocate felt compelled to report the incident, which escalated the matter significantly. The issue was brought before the Judicial Service Commission. Justice Theron vehemently denied the allegation. She provided her own account of the interaction, stating that her words were misinterpreted and that she had no intention of threatening the advocate. This created, a classic he said, she said scenario, pitting the word of a senior advocate against the word of a constitutional court justice. The JSC was left with the difficult task of weighing the conflicting testimonies. Ultimately, the Judicial Conduct Committee of the JSC dismissed the complaint against Justice Theron, finding that there was not sufficient evidence to support the advocate's claim of a threat. While she was cleared, the incident itself was damaging. It created a public spectacle of conflict between a judge and a lawyer, and forced the highest court to deal with an internal conduct complaint. It serves as a powerful reminder that for judges, every interaction, every word spoken in and out of the courtroom is under a microscope. Maintaining an unimpeachable standard of conduct and temperament is not just a preference, it is, really, an absolute necessity. Our final case focuses on Judge President Dunstan Malambo, the head of the Gauteng High Court, one of the busiest and most influential court divisions in the country. The controversies surrounding him are not about personal enrichment or racist remarks. Instead, they delve into the delicate and often contentious intersection of law and politics. The allegations against him have centered on claims of judicial overreach and accusations that he has allowed his court to be used for political battles. Judge Malambo has presided over the Gauteng division during a period of intense political turmoil in South Africa, a time that saw numerous high-profile cases involving former President Jacob Zuma and the ongoing battles around state capture. The The Gauteng High Court has frequently been the arena for these fights, issuing judgments that have had massive political ramifications. As the leader of this court, Judge Malambo has, naturally, been in the eye of the storm. The primary criticism leveled against him, often by political factions aligned with those who have lost in his court, is that of judicial activism or judicial overreach. This is the accusation that judges are no longer just interpreting the law, but are effectively making it, stepping into the domain of the executive and legislative branches of government. Critics have pointed to certain judgments as evidence that Judge Malambo and his court have an anti-Zuma or a particular political bias. These accusations came to a head during his interview for the position of Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. During a marathon session with the Judicial Service Commission, he was grilled for hours by commissioners about these very issues. He was forced to defend his judicial philosophy and the track record of his court against pointed questions about his alleged political leanings and his handling of politically sensitive cases. Judge Malambo has consistently defended his and his court's integrity, arguing that they are simply applying the law and the Constitution without fear or favor, regardless of the political status of the individuals involved. He maintains that in a constitutional democracy, it is the judiciary's duty to hold the powerful to account, and that this is what his court has done. While no formal finding of misconduct has ever been made against him, the controversy surrounding him highlights the immense pressure on judges in a highly polarized political environment. It underscores the constant battle judges face to maintain their independence and to ensure that justice is not only done, but is also seen to be done, free from any political taint. So there you have it. 10 judges, 10 stories of controversy that have tested the very limits of South Africa's justice system. From allegations of improper influence and corruption to shocking prejudice and ethical lapses, these cases paint a deeply troubling picture. They force us to ask a difficult question. If we can't place our absolute trust in the judiciary, then what's left? The rule of law is not an abstract concept, it's the invisible architecture that holds a society together. When its foundations crack, the entire structure is at risk. This isn't just a problem for lawyers and politicians to solve. The integrity of the justice system belongs to every single citizen. It is our collective responsibility to demand better. We must call for greater transparency in judicial appointments, a more efficient and decisive disciplinary process through the JSC, and a culture of unwavering accountability for every person who wears a judicial robe. We cannot afford to be complacent when the stakes are this high. The fight for a just society requires constant vigilance from all of us. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive. If this video has opened your eyes or made you think, please consider sharing it. The more people who are aware of these issues, the louder our collective voice for change becomes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content that matters. And most importantly, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How do we restore faith in the system? The conversation starts now.